Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell.
Yo, mic check 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hopefully you're able to hear me and everything like that. We are here live. You're pretty much on location or whatever it is or whatnot. Here when it comes to the September 14th edition of the Boxing Source podcast, right? And still recovering from what happened last night here and everything like that. And man, I'm still like really in a tizzy or whatever it is. Hopefully you're able to properly hear me and see me here on this thing. When it comes to this particular edition of the Boxing Swords podcast here, when it comes to live on Rumble and on YouTube. You know, and we got of course some people here that are joining us live and whatnot. So big ups for everyone that's either listening live or watching live. You'll hear, and we got one of our great subscribers here on YouTube, as we just reached 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. Props to all of y'all for subscribing to the YouTube channel here for the Boxing Source. But I gotta post this here already. Jesus Sam in the building saying fake Nello got schooled. He says, "Hey, it's called boxing." And man, that's pretty much what we saw here on Saturday night at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Okay, undisputed super middleweight championship of the world. There between Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan and Terence Crawford. Okay, and we kind of was talking about this over the previous few weeks or the past few weeks, whether it's been on the Boxing Source podcast or through Real Boxing with Ronnie Shields. We've said that, listen, it's about matchups. It's about how the mannerisms of each fighters and how they match up. And because of that, that's why we favored Terence Crawford for the win. And man, we kind of like called it from all of those weeks ago, and what you saw there at Allegiant Stadium was pretty much everything that I kind of like envisioned. What you kind of heard from Coach Ronnie Shields, what basically was hearing a little bit from Joseph Herring. It was just that he just couldn't really kind of like believe that it could happen, but more and more it started to seem realistic before the fight actually happened. But when I talked about the tail of the tape between these two fighters, I said, one, you had Terence Crawford as a taller fighter. You had Terence Crawford with the longer reach from 74 to 70. I'm not gonna put in the what the measurement is, because we ain't gonna go there, or at least here on live. All right, but 74 to 70. And with that, I said, listen, you're gonna see that be the key here in this particular bout. And kind of like talked about it the morning of the fight. When I was on there with Brunch Boxing, I said, look, I said that reach advantage is going to be a real problem for Canelo Alvarez. And he was going to be dealing with a southpaw stance that he's had issues with over the course of his professional career. And that's all that Terence Crawford did. He went out there in the southpaw stance. He utilized the jab at key moments early in the fight and during the fight. You know what I mean? See, no, nope. There was no instance where, nope, there was no instance where I picked Canelo. No. Nope. So what I was telling you was that on the tail of the tape, I said when you have a fighter that has almost the same dimensions as a Floyd Mayweather when it comes to reach, that it was going to be an issue for Canelo to try to close the distance because he's not a guy that really does any bobbing and weaving of sorts. You know what I mean? So you have to either try to slip and move or slip and counter, to try to be effective against the Terence Crawford. And when you're the shorter fighter, have the shorter reach, and you're not faster, bad all the way around. And yes, Brother Hasem Sim here on the live chat. Yep, they did. They did. Okay. And I'll get to that because you really seen, just real quick, what you saw on Saturday night was almost the same thing you saw to a certain extent when you had Canelo Alvarez facing Dimitri Bivol. Timely movement, jabs at the right spots, being out of the range of Canelo Alvarez, not falling for the traps, but in another sense, not falling towards the strategy of sorts initially with Canelo Alvarez. Because y'all seen it, it was very evident, especially in the first half of the fight, that Canelo Alvarez, once he was getting within range, was trying to work the body. And all you seen was the left hook to the body of Terence Crawford. That's pretty much what you seen when it was very evident. Seeing if you could get Terence Crawford to drop his guard or to, kind of like react to the left to the body and then work off of that. But you didn't see that many punches, I would say in bunches there from Canelo Alvarez. And that was not a good look for him, particularly midway through the fight and in the 11th round, which I'll get to here later, right? Because what you had in a sense, okay, was that you had Canelo that basically, had multiple disadvantages and couldn't necessarily adjust to those, And that was the thing that he had to do against a guy to the level of a Terence Crawford. Okay. Crawford, props to him. Timely jabs, timely movement, being able to, see what openings were out there. Okay. And be able to take advantage of those openings and try to be first and try to be last. Win the exchanges. And, just like Brother Jesus says here in the live chat, win those exchanges, had the best exchanges when, they're up close, And there were times when the quickness of Terence Crawford overwhelmed Canelo to the point where he was frustrated. And that's why I brought up Canelo versus Bivol, because you see Bivol at a certain point was able to just be out of range to where Canelo was just frustrated that he couldn't really get to Dimitri Bivol then and Terence Crawford yesterday. Okay. And, that was why I kind of like said, from a matchup standpoint, it's just not really good for Canelo Alvarez unless if he was able to make a proper adjustment and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? What's going on, brother? Jay Watts in the building, man. What's going on with you here? Being part of the Boxing Source podcast live chat. Okay. Now, like I was saying here, with those little exchanges that they had up close, Crawford did what he had to do in order to be first and last, right? And y'all were watching on Netflix and everything like that, which I hadn't gotten to the point where I've been able to watch it on Netflix. When I tell you that it took a long time to get back to the hotel from Allegiant Stadium, insane. But whatever y'all saw there, I was able to watch on the brand new Jumbotron thing that they set up over Allegiant Stadium for this fight, which is crazy. You know what I mean? Um, and the thing about it was that, with Crawford, he just knew that he had it from a distance, one, but then up close, he was still the faster fighter. And after a few rounds, you kind of seen him kind of be like, oh, this is Canelo. Oh man, I got him. I got him. You know what I mean? But hearing from multiple folks that have like watched on Netflix, they're able to hear what the corners were saying, because that's the thing about it, going live or being there live, is that you don't necessarily hear what the trainers are saying in the corners in between rounds. Shout out to Brian Bomac McIntyre, there, just round by round, just keeping Crawford level headed and saying, hey, you got this, it's cool, just don't give him any real opportunities to try to get to you, which means, those exchanges. But even in those exchanges, as was mentioned earlier, Crawford did what he had to do in order to win those exchanges. You know what I mean? But for me, live, man, I thought Crawford like dominated the first half of the fight. Okay. And to be honest with you, when it was like by around 9 or 10, me personally, I couldn't really find two clear rounds that Canelo won. Okay. But going through the 10th round, I think it was either round 9 and round 10, there was one of those rounds where, Crawford couldn't be, I don't think it was round 9, because not round 9 looked like, I think was like had real action back and forth, right? But after round 10, okay, I had Crawford well ahead, right? But I just felt that going into round 11, that the scorecards were going to be close. Okay. And with that being said, I was like, you know what? Crawford has to get this 11th round. You know what I mean? He has to get this 11th round. So I was like saying live, even though I was like way up there in like the 300 level, on like the ends, like how, of course, it's Allegiant Stadium, football stadium, how you have like one side of it would have been, if it's a football field, one side is the end zone, the other side, you got another end zone. That's the ends that I was basically at, not like in the center. You know what I mean? So I was still like, yelling. I'm like, yo, for this 11th round, if Crawford wants to secure this fight, he has to make sure that if they're battling in close, that he has to win those exchanges. And you've seen it from like right off the rip, first minute of the 11th round, they were basically going at it. And I'm saying win the exchange, win the exchange, win the exchange. And that's what he was doing. He was winning the exchanges in that 11th round. And by the end of that 11th round, I said, okay, he got this fight. He got this fight, right? 12th round, kind of was, close and everything like that. But when, the scorecards were red, when that first one was red, 116, 112, I was like, see, that was it. That was what I called. I called 116, 112 for Crawford. Where they had, was it Max Luca and Steve Weisfeld that scored at 115 and 113 in favor of Terence Crawford. So, it was it almost exactly had the same scores as Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol. And that's kind of crazy, because it almost seemed like, it was Tim Cheatham that had it 115, 113, and also Max Luca. But Weisfeld had it 116, 112 in favor of Crawford, which, as I said, was the score that I had. You feel me? But, with that being said, props to Terence Crawford there in reference to this particular performance for him to become the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. Okay. Now, going into this, the discussion had been, what would this mean for boxing? What would this mean for Terence Crawford? Um, as I was able to, ask the question there to Terence Crawford in reference to what this is compared to 2023, before he was about to face Errol Spence for those undisputed welterweight championships. Kind of like and in that he said, okay, this will be the start or the beginning of the Terence Crawford era. Okay, um, and here, this kind of like said, hey, this will stamp my name, and the debate will be over. That was his answer when I mentioned that. When I said, okay, with the win over Canelo Alvarez to become the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world, what would that mean for you, and how would that kind of like have you in, boxing history? You know what I mean? You will kind of like get into that here when it comes to this, because there's like a lot to kind of like decipher with all of that. All right, real quick, Jesus Sim here, asked a question: how was the attendance here at the Allegiant Stadium? Okay, I'm gonna be straight up with y'all. I'm gonna be straight up with y'all. Okay. Given that it was, billed as a big event, a huge event, Allegiant Stadium, and when the tickets initially were out there on Ticketmaster or whatever it is, y'all saw the ticket prices. Okay, I'll just say that one, I was able to get a ticket pretty much the night before the fight took place. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, it was packed. It was packed. It wasn't like, jam packed over capacity or at capacity or anything like that. No, but it was packed. Okay, um, very good crowd. The acoustics to, the building or the venue. I would say that um, it made it seem, pretty good. But with me, as far as like boxing events, they have to be at like certain venues to kind of like get the whole feel, right? And I don't know what it was, but during the days leading into the fight, and then when the fight actually started, it didn't feel to me like it was, like a big fight. You know what I'm saying? It didn't necessarily feel like that to me in a particular sense. But outside of that, I would say that kind of was like a pretty good atmosphere. Nothing over the top. Nothing out of like out of the ordinary or anything like that. But I kind of like felt like it was felt like it was missing a little bit of something there. You know what I mean? Real quick, seeing if I get one of my panelists to join in here. That I kind of missed here that he was on part of another conversation yesterday immediately after the fight, but once I had joined, he probably had signed out. But it's one of our great contributors to the Boxing Source podcast there, and that is the Boxing Academic. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, JR? How you doing?
All good, man. Trying to catch up and everything like that. A few things here and there because one thing I tried to do after those fights in Legion Stadium was to try to stay up to watch Naoya Inoue, but that didn't quite work. Trying to stay up to watch him live, but initially here, what were your thoughts on the fight?
Um, Obviously, you got to give all the credit in the world to Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford definitely shows and proves that like the skill level is always shown in the biggest moments. He always rises to the occasion, and so you got to give him all the credit in the world for doing that. And so, I mean, I think there were a few sort of themes that were relevant going into the fight. One is that I sort of heard you mention is that Terence Crawford had to fight I wouldn't call it a perfect fight, but he had to fight a dominant fight to make sure that he won the scores even 7-5. um, there were rounds to where depending on what you like, yeah, you could have gave it to Canelo, but if I'm being honest, the rounds that they could give to Canelo, they gave it to him, at least for the other two judges. And so Terence Crawford was aware of that. And so his game plan was, hey, I'm finna come at you. And there were times where he went at Canelo, round 9, I believe, where he was, trying to put some on Canelo, and then Canelo made a awesome adjustment, which was he hit him, he headbutted him, and that stopped all the momentum. Like that to me is synonymous to I don't know if it was Tyson Fury or whoever it was, but somebody got hurt. Bermain Stavern against Deontay Wilder, somebody got hurt, and then essentially they just tackled him, and then essentially stopped the knockdown. Like that is on par with me, to me, to that sort of deterrent, to where somebody kicking your butt and then you do something that is borderline illegal, but then you stop the pace so much to where it gives you a break. And Canelo doing that gave him a long breather. Obviously Bud was like what you doing, man? The Bud was like thrown off, and then Canelo, dare I say it, came back and won the round because Bud was just thrown off so much in that round. um I still like the thing that Bud sort of kept mentioning was, what can you say about me now? And if we are being honestly critical, I mean, this is Bud's biggest win. And so up until now, even till now, but you have to crown him. Like, I mean, even with the last undisputed, you got to crown him. But I'm essentially saying that I get it that Bud doesn't like that people sort of criticize him and saying that the fighters that he has fought have been weaker. And to some extent, I mean, the matches weren't there. Obviously, he had the things with his promotion, with Bob Arum and stuff, and you could see that Bob didn't really give him the opportunities, and those things are real. But at the end of the day, you fought guys that other guys could beat. Maybe not as well as you, but they still could have beat them. I mean, but now you fought a Hall of Famer in Canelo, and then I mean you showed your skill level, and no one can sort of take that away from you. And but up until now, everybody else was just kind of like blah. And so I guess I'll go into my scorecard, what
All
I
right.
had it per round.
Word.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So I noticed something before the bell. So I put a note in my notes, and I put round 0 before the bell. And so Bud warmed up about 40 minutes before the fight started. Like he had a sweat. You could tell he had already hit the pads, and he had went through a full sort of warm up 40 minutes before the fight started. And this was before the music started, before all of that, like before the little concert. And so I started to get a little nervous because, I'm watching Bud, and I'm like, dang, Bud done, he warmed up too early. You know what I'm saying? You know how it is if you playing ball or something, and you get out there and you warm up, then you get cold. Like that's no good. And so I was hoping that wouldn't be a factor, and obviously it wasn't. So luckily about that. And then I sort of noticed, everyone is gonna have their opinion, but I'm just telling you what I noticed. I noticed Bud had nervous energy, and again, I'm just pointing out things I saw. And when I say nervous energy, you could see Bud couldn't stay still per se. Like he was ready. He was like ready to go. And it sort of reminded me of how anxious like Wilder is before his fights with Fury. Like all the times where he would
Hmm.
fight Fury and he was anxious and stuff. And so one of my concerns was, will Bud give up too much energy by investing so much emotional energy in this moment? Luckily, he hit Canelo enough too many times to where that didn't even come into the fight. But I will say there were times in the match where Bud kind of coasted in rounds, and then that just happened to be the rounds where Canelo would get his off, and then he would throw more punches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
round one, I gave it to Bud. I said close, but then I said I gave it to Bud. And my note was Canelo didn't punch for the first minute and 30 seconds. And everything. So after that point, when Canelo did land, Bud answered back. So for the first minute and 30 seconds, Canelo didn't land a punch. I don't even think he threw a punch in the first round. But then once he started landing, Bud always answered back with the shots that he threw. Round two, I said, okay, it was close. Both guys are landing and giving offense. But what Bud was doing seemed a bit more effective, but I called it close. So I could see why the guy, whoever he was on the main card, I could see how he scored that for Bud because I called that one close. I mean, how he scored it for Canelo. Round three, I gave it to Bud. Bud boxing and keeping Canelo at a distance and walking Canelo into shots. Good boxing. So essentially, he was, using his movement and essentially making Canelo walk into shots. That was the exact plan that I projected that he was going to use. I mean, everybody could see that's the plan. Round four, I gave to Canelo. Canelo landing the right hand a lot more. Bud took one shot really well. Bud stopped throwing jabs and lacked movement. So that was to me was one of the rounds that Bud, you could tell, maybe he was a little tired. He was just, recouping or whatever. But then he stopped throwing the jab, and then Canelo started landing more right hands. Round five, I gave to Canelo. Bud not landing shots anymore. Bud being more concerned on defense and is not throwing any offense. And so that was the round I believe that Canelo like he took that round kind of big. That's probably one of the biggest rounds that he took. And then you could tell that Bud came, and then I don't know if Bud was resting in that round either. So round six, I gave to Bud. Crawford started using distance again, and his using distance and long range again. Canelo had thrown a lot of shots the round before, so that probably affected his output. So you could tell, and even Bud in the post fight said after the round five, I felt I had to get control of the fight again. So you could see him make a concerted effort of coming in and winning that round. Round seven, I gave to Bud. Bud stand put more and landing counter shots, good counters. Canelo is still following him. Round eight, I gave to Canelo. Bud kind of resting. Canelo threw more shots. More activity won this round by Canelo. Round nine, I said it was an even round, but I was leaning toward Bud. Crawford was winning the early exchanges and had a lot of momentum. Canelo broke the momentum by headbutting Bud. Then Bud lost that edge. Bud probably won the round with enough action, but Canelo did come on strong because Bud was just so thrown off. But I call that one a 10-10 round just because, it kind of depends on what you like.
Mm-hmm.
Round 10, I gave to Canelo. Crawford getting hit with too many straight rights. Canelo landing too many clean. And so one thing that is real was that Canelo never landed his best shot. However, he did hit Bud clean-ish at times. Like Bud was moving, took some off the shot, et cetera, et cetera. But
Right.
Canelo never got the opportunity to land like his real power shot. And if you remember in the post conference, Bud was like, shit, Mean Machine hit harder than Canelo. I mean, I could see him having that perspective, but the reason why he very likely has the perspective is because Canelo never hit him with his best shot. Bud did a great job of neutralizing Canelo's offense. Round 11, I gave to Bud. Bud landing clean shots using speed to land more shots, and then round 12, I gave to Bud. So my scorecard was 7 Bud, 4 Canelo, and then one tie round that I was leaning toward Bud. So it could be either 8-4 or 7-5. And so that was in line with exactly what they said. It just kind of depends on what you like. Are there any themes that I want to talk about? So I didn't talk too long. Let me let you get in.
All right, so you kind of like had the pretty much like the same scorecard that the judges had, and or like the thing that I kind of like predicted before the fight. But before I get into what I'll go into as far as like some of the rounds, I have to bring in another one of our panelists in here. Very thankful for him to join us here on this day. As is a big day for this person. Okay, y'all know that this is the resident chef of the Boston Source podcast, but it is also the Earth Strong of the resident chef of the Boston Source podcast. But I'm glad that he's able to take the time here to chop it up with us, and that is Brother Terrell here. Being able to join us here. So, Brother Terrell, if you're able to check in, what's good with you, man? Let me see if he had something here with the mic or whatnot, because I think he was able to join. Yo, what's up? What's up?
Hey, so glad to be on, and just thankful for another day, which happens to be my birthday. Glad for that.
Sir.
But this,
Happy birthday.
thank you, brother, thank you. But this is definitely a podcast I definitely could not miss for nothing in the world. Definitely. And honestly, this is a great boxing birthday present for me too, just to see the result of this fight and everything, and going forward. But even with that, definitely caught all the analysis of the round by round analysis that Mike just gave. I definitely concur with all that. Even that some of the stuff we talked about before the fight, how would he fight? Does he need to secure what rounds, things like that. And do I necessarily agree with two cards of 115, 113? Not really. I would have been more apt for three cards of 116, 112 like that. Instead of, but regardless, we got the good scorecard, but got the victory, and we were able to move forward and shit all the haters up for Crawford like that. So it's just good to see a fight go like you wanted it to go, and it's good to see there's no bullshit in the decision, and the right man won a card fair and square. I mean, there's so much to talk about this fight. Just the fact that early rounds definitely awarded to Crawford like as should be. I mean, it was a whole lot of activity in there per se as far as clean punching, but what was evident was the speed of Crawford, the ability to no. Let me slow down. Crawford is one of the elite fighters of this generation, right? For one, you got to have the discipline in order to record that, to stay in that's the same fight mode, which you did. Speed, distance, ring generalship, awareness, jab, so many things he did right. The first few rounds were, we were kind of back and forth like that. We get that. I still give Crawford the edge for the first few rounds. Round 5 is when Canelo really started to sit down on his punches, and basically I can see that. Hey, motherfucker, I got you now. Because he really started to sit down on his punches like that. But at the same time, like you guys said, the overhand right was definitely connecting all night for Canelo. And with Bud, he definitely stayed in that southpaw stance the entire night. And not only staying in that stance, but having the discipline to keep his foot on the outside, that way he doesn't get caught up, tangled up like that, get his foot stepped on, which we've seen so many different times for southpaw fighters, right? But just giving Canelo that different look the entire fight. Matter of fact, did he ever switch to orthodox? I don't think he did, right?
No, he didn't.
Yeah,
He didn't.
yeah.
And I mean, I'll point that out here later on. But continue to cook.
Yeah, but he just kept a distance, staying close. He knew when to come in, go in. When he knew when to stay out. And the best thing about it, Canelo, like you said, never really got a full big punch on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once again, and that was just the ability to be able to slip punches. Now, how many times did Canelo? I mean, I'm sorry, Crawford. That is just dodge, boom. Did old Mayweather stuff hit? Now you see me, now you don't. And one of the best things I thought about last night from watching the fight, JR, what's the phrase that you say at the end of every show?
The point of boxing is to hit and not get hit, not to stand and trade.
That part. And that's exactly what Bud did throughout the course of the fight. Even when it slowed down in round 7, 8, 9, slowed down. Once again, Canelo's trying to hunt him down. But once again, we know what we talked about so much. Canelo is a flat-footed fighter, right? And of course he doesn't have necessarily get on his bike enough in order to cut the ring off properly in order to negotiate exchanges like that. But and let me just stop right there. Bud is 38 years old
Mm-hmm.
and arguably looked the best in this fight. I mean, for me, the Spence fight was a masterclass. But last night, right there on par with that. And one of the best things for me, post fight, Canelo said that Bud gave him a better fight than Mayweather, and that's saying something. I mean, now granted, we know that Canelo was 23 years old, but Canelo was still good then. He was good. Of course, he didn't have the years of experience back then, but Canelo was definitely still good, and we know that Mayweather schooled him. But for Canelo to have all this experience then against different fighters, sizes, things like that, and for him to say that Bud was a better fighter than Mayweather, that's saying a whole lot. And once again, that's to say he is elite. Elite.
Mm.
I want to say one thing before you
Yeah,
cook, JR.
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
One adjustment that I was hoping to see from Canelo that I don't think I saw was most his shots were wider shots. And so Terence Crawford to me could could mostly keep his hands up, on his temples essentially and essentially block Canelo's wider punches. And he was never really worried about Canelo coming straight down the pipe. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one adjustment that Canelo to me did not make that would have potentially changed the fight for the better because he was throwing all the wide shots. Bud was catching the wide shots and then coming back, with his offense or whatever. He never
Mm-hmm.
like if you look at a lot of the exchanges, Bud it was an opening there. I mean, easy to say, harder to do, right? But he never changed his shot trajectory up and threw the straight shot to get between the guard. He was always throwing kind of wider shots.
Mm. Yeah. So I was, looking at the thing there is trying to find the official scorecards for this fight
I say
because because I mentioned the thing there when it came to the 11th round, and I was saying there watching there live. I said, you know what? I think Terence Crawford needs to win this 11th round. And man, I'm looking at this thing and I'm going through at least two of the scorecards, right? And two of the scorecards, had the 11th and the 12th round both for or all for Terence Crawford, right? But those two cards that had it 115, 113, basically had the fight even through 10 rounds, right? So it would have been like what, like a 95 to 95, I think it would be through 10 rounds if it was like, yeah, 5 rounds to 5, 95, 95, even, right? While, Steve Weisfeld that scored it 8 rounds to 3, he basically had, Crawford in the lead, but they, kind of it was still like I said, it was still close. So Crawford had to win those last 2 rounds in order for him to win the fight. Like if he would have lost like the either the 11th or the 12th round, you could have had a majority draw. That's how close the scorecards were. The fight wasn't that close. It wasn't. But given it being in Vegas, given a couple of the judges that people know were kind of notorious with their crazy scores or whatever it is, that just makes it to the point where it's like, yo, you might have to do something a little bit extra just to be sure that you won the fight. And, well, Crawford had to do it. He had to do it in the 11th round. And, well, I guess he had to do it in the 12th round, too, because if he didn't do it in the 12th round, like, geez, man, it would have been 114 if he didn't win either one of those rounds on the scorecard for two of those judges.
And
that's
how many times in the past have we seen that same scenario where a fighter supposedly has a fight secured and going to the championship rounds and takes a cruise off? Let's look way back in history to De La Hoya. Who was it? De La Hoya. De La Hoya
Eloy
versus.
Trinidad.
Yep,
Eloy
exactly.
Trinidad.
Yep. He started a cruise, took those rounds off, thought he had to fight in the bag, and boom, wham, bamboozle. That's what happened. And once again, just awareness of Crawford and his corner to recognize that. And like I said, just we know Canelo. Like I said in our chat, we talk about look at Canelo Bevo. Those scorecards. That fight was not as close as it should have been. Not at all. Not at all.
Mhm. Yep.
And that's where and this is funny. This is a champion versus a champion. So usually the champion gets the not the favor, but this is a champion versus champion. But I mean, I'm just saying, we all know the boxing gods were against Crawford. That's it is what it is. That's just the truth. So
Yeah, I mean, this was no secret. Like Canelo, the amount of money that he puts in people's pockets, all the money that was made, all the money that Netflix made, all the money that Defenders made, all the money that was throughout Las Vegas, they want 2 or 3 more than paydays. So, I mean, I'm like, this ain't right, but you can see why they're inclined to sort of give close rounds to Canelo because Canelo coming back means more for the sport. Now it's you look at it 2 different ways. Canelo winning means more for the sport financially, but Bud winning means more for the legacy of the sport. So we always know which one trumps legacy or money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that was like one of the things that I kind of hinted at before the fight too. I was like, watch for the draw. Like it could be really possible that you could get a split draw for this particular bout because one, it would make for a huge controversy in the sport of boxing, and it would be something that people would discuss, for a very, very long time. And given the platform that it was on, being on Netflix, having a fight of that magnitude be on a platform that is, distributed to what over 300 million subscribers, right? So you having whatever the audience they would have for this particular fight, and the result could be a draw, that would have made things absolutely crazy. Or if it would have been in the favor of Canelo Alvarez, how that would be. You know what I'm saying? So that also could have been taken into account, but it's just like it said, those last 2 rounds were huge for Terence Crawford, for him to finish off those rounds and being able to win. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. Uh, Timothy said, yeah. Real quick, wanted to hit up the comments from Timothy Taylor there. He says Canelo felt the pressure from fighting a welterweight that he had to viciously knock him out fast instead of setting traps. Canelo set no traps and straight telegraph punches for all 12 rounds. It's pretty much interesting. He also says that Canelo fought like Marcos Maidana versus Floyd Mayweather. Pretty interesting comments there. Boxing Academic, if you can continue here real quick before I go into those comments.
The crazy thing about this fight is that the amount of marketability was limited, was not as great as it could have been. They had an opportunity to make this fight, the fight that we got, the Billy fight, like they had an opportunity to make those be what people sort of have in their mind from Netflix. And what they ended up doing was they had this fight start at 1 a.m. They did not do themselves a favor because a lot of people did not see the greatness that that Bud put on.
Man,
They did not see how well the fight was. Most
man,
people gonna have to see it the second weekend. Like they dropped the ball on that one. They got to
man.
do better.
Man, I was hoping that you know I don't know if it's T-Mobile service or having all of those people in the stadium at the same time. But I wanted my story to be, like released when I posted it because it was like after midnight. Once you had all of those fights that happened that went all 10 rounds and all that type of stuff. The Mbili versus Martinez, the what is it? The Callum Smith versus or Callum Walsh, excuse me, versus Fernando Vargas Jr. That Muhammad Alakel fight that against Travis Crawford that one shouldn't have been in the main card and two shouldn't have been 10 rounds. Having all three of those fights go the full 10 rounds, it was a struggle. I'm gonna tell you that right now. It was a struggle because I would, hey, listen. Shout out to Timothy Taylor. You're posting this here. The East Coast wasn't bad. Hey, shoot, I almost wasn't bad out there in the stadium. Because goodness gracious, man, I'm like it's after 12 a.m. Eastern time, and the main event hadn't even started yet. I'm like, oh my god, this is like insane, man. So having that fight take place after like 12:15 or 12:30 a.m. Eastern time, it kind of like made it to be where you might not have had the live reactions that we could have had with Terence Crawford having that decision to become the new undisputed super middleweight champion. And I think that like really affects the sport in a sense because just to be honest with you, there's no need to have a bunch of fights in one card if it's going to push the event to end real late, whether it's Eastern time or Pacific time or whatever it is. Because as we've like mentioned in the past in the history of the podcast, if we talk about like even in the East Coast when you had Tank Davis versus Hector Luis Garcia, like those four fights on that pay-per-view card, the first three went all 10 or all 12 rounds. So by the time we had the start of Tank versus Hector Luis Garcia, it was like 12:30 a.m. close to 1 a.m. Eastern time when that fight started. Same thing here. You can't you can't have that if you're trying to get as many people watching as possible. And shout out to the Boxing Academic. Here's another one of our prime examples when you had that Thursday night fight with Shakur Stevenson and Edwin De Los Santos at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Oh my God, that was the worst. That was the absolute worst. And to this day, I'm still happy that I didn't think about going out there for that fight. Goodness, that was insane.
Something that an MMA fan told me was that they had an MMA card and they didn't want to start the fights until after that was over to make sure the crowd from the MMA was able to obviously
Oh,
support the numbers for this.
yeah, I know that they had like some like MMA events that were in the area, and I forgot about like the another MMA event going on during the same day as this. Like, I don't want this stuff to kind of like go on at the same time because they did that before. Canelo had, I think it was the Berlanga fight, and then MMA, UFC had an event there in the same city, I think over at the Sphere or something. And I'm like, yeah, that's just not gonna work. And yeah, you need to cut out these music performances and all that type of stuff, man. I'm not with all of that. That's why, like last year when you had Crawford versus Medrimov and having Eminem perform, like, come on, we don't really need all of that. Like that was what August 3rd of last year, and I was at a local card in the DC area during that same time. That whole card was over, and I was able to get home before Eminem finished his performance. That's how bad it was. And I'm like, nah, we gotta like cut all of that out. You know what I'm saying? Um, and here's one because this is one thing that Box Academic and Brother Terrell, y'all could chime in on, because like I said earlier, I haven't been able to watch it on Netflix yet. So Timothy Taylor here on the live chat says, I didn't like the MMA UFC color commentary guy calling the fight. It looked like he was out of his element there. So I want to get y'all your thoughts on the Netflix, how it looked and how it was, with people, commentating. I know that, Andre Ward was part of it. They had like a little other parts of the team that included Antonio Tarver. So I wanted to see what y'all thought about how Netflix presented the fight, from a camera perspective, director, producer, and having a commentary on there.
Was the white dude at the end Mike Coppinger?
Most
Yeah,
likely, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why people have. I've never, like, I heard his name, but I've never looked at him and I've never seen him interact. But I could see why a lot of people sort of have their view of him. Even
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Shakur's sort of interaction with him, I don't know when it
Right.
was,
Yeah,
but like
that was a couple months ago, but
uh,
exactly.
Andre Ward in the telecast was doing his best sort of PR to not, like, be offended or whatever. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe he is the whatever you call the Jim Lampley character antagonist, or there's probably a better word for it. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if he maybe for a certain sect he adds something, but it seems to deteriorate from the product. And I'm sure he's knowledgeable in what he's doing and stuff, but it was just something just off about. But I tell you what, whoever the guy who was scoring the fight, the scorer that they brought the scorecards, I was I was questioning, a few of his round scoring and stuff. I just
Okay. Let me see
yeah, I
if
just didn't
I
know.
got it here. It's John Anik was I guess the lead commentator there. I had like a picture of the whole team that they were gonna have, but I probably deleted it or something, right? So it had John Anik there as like the color commentary thing. There with Max Kellerman, Andre Ward, and then you had like the separate thing there with the desk with Mario Lopez and Antonio Tarver, with Mark Kriegel and Mike Coppinger, right? And they also had Jim Gray and Heidi Androl there. But yeah,
So who was beside Andre Ward at the ring?
Max Kellerman most likely.
And it was three people. It was another bald headed guy.
John Anik was the other guy that was likely with him.
Okay, so John Enoch was the out of place person there. Is
Yeah,
he MMA?
yeah, he is.
Okay, so
Yeah,
now I can speak to it now. Yes, he was definitely out of place. And like a lot of times he was making commentary and he was sort of clashing with Andre Ward. And I mean sometimes he kind of clashed with Max as well. Like Max would sort of, how you have three commentators and you have three different perspectives and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if he's necessarily added to the show to make it better.
Mhm.
But they got to use their people, keep them employed as well too. Because I mean,
Yeah.
Dana White want to make it like good for everybody.
Hmm.
Yeah.
TKO, Sella, UFC, that whole thing there. I kind of, I gave the whole team that was there part of it. And shout out to the live chat, shout out to Cam J Network in the building. Timothy Taylor says, hey, you don't bring in Jim Lampley to call a John Jones fight. Yeah, you don't. You know what I'm saying? And he also says what Mike Coppinger gets off weirdo vibes. Shout out to Mar here in the building. He says Mike Coppinger is the modern day Brian Kenny. And yeah, oh, shout out to this too, because this was part of Fight Week. One of the things that was like the biggest topics of Fight Week there was the press conference. And as I mentioned earlier, I was able to ask a question there to Terence Crawford there very early in the press conference. But there was a back and forth between Dana White and Sean Sattel. And Sean Sattel called Dana White to task in reference to the Muhammad Ali Act and, him trying to abolish the Muhammad Ali Act. And, for those that, don't, are not familiar with Dana White, is that through the UFC or, mixed martial arts, they kind of, subvert the Muhammad Ali Act by calling their people that, you do boxing a lot, they call them strikers. And through that, they can't be placed into that whole thing with the Muhammad Ali Act. So earlier in the week, they had something in California where they were trying to push the whole thing to, amend the Muhammad Ali Act, and they had a hearing there in California. And, there was a lot of pushback there towards Dana White that included a number of people. Shout out to, Brother Matt of Brunch Boxing, shout out to Rachel Donaire that was also on the conference call that shared her thoughts. I was able to share my thoughts on there as well. So they were able to table it in California until I think November or December. But you're trying to do the same thing. If it was going to happen in California, it probably happen in Nevada or other places where you have UFC. So for Sean Zattel to kind of like step up to Dana White and say, hey, all this type of stuff, like why are you trying to amend the Muhammad Ali Act and try to undercut a number of the fighters that are trying to do, trying to, get themselves paid. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Sean probably ain't gonna get too many invites back to these events. Cause I mean that was like
But
like in your face.
Had to stay. Yeah.
Is that the same guy that has the? Is that the same guy that's on the podcast with Sean Porter?
Yeah. Yep.
He's good. He has a platform. He's good.
Yeah. And shout out to Stacking Chips 007. You're the first one to kind of like mention that. Shout out to Mara. He says that Sean Zattel stood on business. And salute to Canelo for calling out Max too, because Max Kellerman on that press conference was like really, really on Dana White, man. And Canelo was like, no. Boxing always been big and become bigger and bigger and bigger. And Max was like, whoa, don't you think, boxing could be like the NBA or the NFL or whatever? I'm like, and he's like, no. Boxing always been big and will continue to be big, so shout out to Canelo on that. But he also was trying to get involved with that whole thing between Dana White and Sean Zattel, talk about fight.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah,
but one thing, the reason why boxing is not a common like topic is because they went to the whatever the advanced pay model, whatever the subscription channel models are, to where you sort of had a barrier to get people to be able to watch it. And then you went to the pay-per-view model as well. That's an even further barrier. So having it on something like a Netflix will get it back closer to being what it used to be, which is it'll be a common sort of talking topic. But you don't do yourself any favors if you run the fight at 1 a.m. to where people can't watch the fight. Like it's on Netflix. It's got so many million people watching. Don't have it at 1 a.m.
Yeah, it's not much different than like, you talking about the NBA and the NFL and all that type of stuff, right? Okay. I'll add in college football. How many people do y'all think watch the NBA when the Golden State Warriors or the Sacramento Kings or, sometimes the Clippers, even the Lakers have their home games at about 10 p.m. Eastern time? Or, or what's going to be happening here tomorrow, as I'm still in Vegas, you're going to have the Las Vegas Raiders facing the LA Chargers, and that's going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern time, right? Or you have those games with UCLA or USC or Stanford or whatever it is, or Cal or Washington, that'll have their home games that start at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Not that many people be watching it from the East Coast. So why would you kind of like cut off that audience from being able to watch your product? You don't necessarily do that. Like you try to like you should be able to have it to the point where as many people are able to watch it, or just have them have that particular choice. So have it around like 8 p.m. Eastern time or something like that. Why would you have it start at like 9 p.m. Eastern time and then have these fights drag out to where the main event is almost at 1 a.m.? But that's also to the point of matchups though, because yeah, some of these matchups they weren't all too hot. And the only thing that kind of like had me was the fight between Christian and Billy and Lester Martinez there, and that was kind of weird as well. But I'll get into that here in a little bit, because we still have to have our closing thoughts here in reference to this fight, how it impacts things currently, and what to think from this point forward. So on one sense, when you have Terence Crawford, okay, he's able to score this win against Canelo Alvarez to become the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. Okay, and I did mention the whole thing in reference to him saying that, hey, this is the Terence Crawford era, and he stamped this as the Terence Crawford era. And what I mean by that is we're in the year of the Gregorian calendar, or whatever you want to call it, 2025. And for like at the very least, the past 10 years, the two fighters that have been standing out since that fight between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, right, has been Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. We're finally able to have a fight between those two. So Terence Crawford getting that win solidifies it being the Terence Crawford era from 2015 up to this particular point. With it being 2025 and him getting this win, it doesn't matter what happens from now to the end of 2029. Y'all could pretty much hand that fighter of the decade to Terence Crawford right now. He has the wins over Errol Spence Jr. He has a win over Sean Porter. He has a win over Canelo Alvarez. You can pretty much say he already has fighter of the decade. But now you have to put him in that conversation of, is he the best fighter of the past 25 years? And kind of like had this, posted up on the website, theboxingsource.net, that if you look at the fighters that are within the top five, of course, who stands out is Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Are people going to put Terence Crawford above the likes of Floyd Mayweather and a Manny Pacquiao as far as is he the number one fighter of the past 25 years? Would you be able to do that? For me, I couldn't. Because there's like a couple of things here. And we mentioned over the history of the Boxing Source podcast. And we talk about resumes and everything like that. And I know that there's been sayings about resumes and going against it, but the thing about it is, when you see some of these fighters and how they became the top fighters within their generation, it's because of who they fought and them getting those wins. So with a Floyd Mayweather, so to speak, right? Or Manny Pacquiao, or if I go to like ESPN.com or whatever it is, and they, had their list of the top 25 boxers or whatever, and they have like Bernard Hopkins at number 3, right? They had Alexander Usyk at number 4, Canelo at number 5, Ward at number 6, and Crawford at number 7. That was before the fight. Now, with Crawford getting this win, where would that put him in that top 25 list? Would that put him at the top, beating a guy that was put out up there at number 5? I don't necessarily think so. Would it put him at number 3 above Hopkins? That's up for debate. Actually, he might have a case, given with Bernard Hopkins. He's had a couple of key wins himself, but given his reign in the middleweight division and the lack of competition within the middleweight division at his time, it kind of, puts that up in the air. But the top 2, I don't think so. But we'll kind of go into that over the next I guess couple weeks, couple days, all that type of stuff. We'll see how that is, man. Um, so that's it. In reference to that, Tim Taylor talks about the thing there when Box Academic brought the thing up with the networks and everything. He says, I don't think the networks really want boxing as a mainstream sport because boxing is racially divisive. Black fans Crawford were happy while Canelo fans were crying. Hey, I'll say this. After the fight, you know, they a number of the fans for Canelo that were around my area, they were kind of slowly realizing that Terence Crawford was the better fighter. So by the time it was like around 9 and 10, they were kind of conceding, right? Now there were some Crawford fans that were talking. They were talking around that area, but you seen some of the Canelo fans that were kind of conceding or whatever it is. There were a couple of other things where you might have had like a little skirmish or fights or whatever, but nothing to the point where it was happening during the fight. It was happening like after the fights, but not during the fight. But I don't know about it being them kind of giving that as like a marketing strategy. Like for example, how we have Teofimo Lopez out there, and we all know about the little presumptions about Teofimo Lopez, but they don't push that as something behind the fighter. Like for example, with Teofimo, they don't do that. So here in this instance, consciously or subconsciously, I don't think boxing kind of like does that at this point. But I don't know if it's going to be something that'll kind of like boost the sport or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think they might have to do a few other things here in order to properly market the sport or market the fighters in that sense. Was it Brother Terrell? You had something?
Yeah, just kind of what you were talking about in terms of definitely the best fighter of the last 10 years, decades, stuff like that. Uh, just in thinking about the resume of Pacquiao and Mayweather, and not only that, how they did that, how they won those fights in their careers. Totally love what Crawford has done, but I think it would definitely come a bit short compared to those two, because we all know Mayweather was phenomenal, a phenomenal fighter. Uh, as he always says, he's a tough competitor.
Hey, listen, y'all gotta understand something. You see, these fighters, they're great. I love them. They're a hell of a fighter. But you gotta understand, all work is easy work. Easy work is all work. And I'm TBE. So so look at this. I'm TBE. I'm the best since 2000, and you gotta consider me as the greatest of all time. Greater than Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali. I'm better than all those dudes. That's kind of like Floyd Mayweather in a sense, but it's when you see who he's fought, yeah, there's kind of like a factor in that because of who he is and who, when he became Money Mayweather, that kind of like added to his legacy as far as like people wanting to fight him. But also before he became Money Mayweather, him having those fights against the Castillos, the Corraleses, the Oscar De La Hoyas, and the performance that he had against Arturo Gatti, and also with Diego Corrales, right? So those type of fights kind of like separate him from a number of the fighters that are within that top 25 list that was out there from ESPN because he had those wins over everybody. And the thing about it also too was that there was like something on I think it was like Instagram where they kind of critiqued the whole thing with Mayweather's legacy, with him, being at 50-0, whatever it was, right? And the thing about it is like, why? It said like something with Jim Gray, making a comment to the extent of like Floyd ruined the sport. No, he didn't. Like the thing about it is like, yeah, you could be undefeated, but it's also about who you beat. It's funny because years ago when Rocky Marciano was able to retire undefeated and was a heavyweight champion of the world, do people like kind of really criticize, Rocky Marciano like that? No, they don't. But the thing about it is like, okay, yeah, a number of these great fighters had losses, but you also got to take into account, as I said weeks ago, the state of boxing in different generations, right? Because it's not like you're going to have fighters of today having 80 or 90 or 100 professional fights. Those days are long gone. So, yeah, you could respect somebody that could have like about 70 fights or so, like Canelo Alvarez, and have like a 3 losses. Or someone like a Roberto Duran that had over 100 plus fights. But these days, you can't have that. And even with Canelo Alvarez, yeah, he has 70 plus fights, but he's also been a professional for 20 years. You're not going to have those type of fighters here, at least these days. I don't see it. So for Floyd to be able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish, has to be respected. It has to be, because it's either okay. So you're going to tell me that Floyd Mayweather would be more respected if his record was 45-5 instead of 50-0? It's like Terrell Thomas, like you mentioned for me to say earlier. As I say, the point of boxing is to hit and not get hit, not to stand and trade. And who was the best at doing that? Floyd Mayweather. So what are we what are we doing here? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and one thing I just
Yeah.
want to add on to, and looking at Canelo. First of all, I totally admire his grace in defeat. There's no complaining, no bad will, no bad mind towards Crawford's performance like that.
Mhm.
Nothing critical. So I totally love Canelo, and I'm a Canelo fan. I'm a big fan of everything he's done. The fight, his record he's compiled, his experience, all that showed everything he's done. And even when I talk about that, and thinking the fact that someone that came originally at 135 and built himself up to the point last night where we saw him beat Canelo. Let's look real quickly at Canelo's resume, right?
Mhm.
Kovalev. I mean, you give it. It is what it is with that one. We know Kovalev was a bit shot, but Canelo did jump up to 175, beat him. Lost to Bebo. He was just outclassed, outsized on that one.
Mhm.
Just the fights with Cater Plant, Danny Jacobs,
Gennady
so many people,
Golovkin,
yeah,
you
and
know.
Triple G.
So,
All those people that were at his size at that weight class, and they couldn't get it done against him. And yeah, you got someone that came up from 135, showed his dominance at each weight class: 135, 140, 147. We know that one fight at 154, and he actually was come in and have the composure and skill, knowledge, all that stuff, and come in and beat the man who has defined this last 10 to 15 years of boxing. And so I don't want to underestimate that. I want to focus on that. Like, Canelo has a solid resume. We know for the last few years he's been kind of bullshitting with his fight, his previous fighting. We know that. We know that.
mhm.
But nevertheless, Canelo has a solid resume himself too. And you got somebody that come in from a low weight class once again, 2 visits down, and step up and did what he did. It's phenomenal. But like I said, in consideration of that, it still doesn't necessarily surpass what Mayweather and Pacquiao's done. It doesn't.
Word, word. Go ahead, box academic. I'm gonna get something here because this is kind of like a pretty interesting date when it comes to boxing history. So no, box academic, you got something there as well.
Yeah. No one can take away what Terence Crawford did, and it's undisputed. He deserves the accolades as that guy, right? The person who actually did it, right? Who really did it. To be undisputed in multiple weight divisions. Yes, the right politics came into place for him to get to undisputed, and no matter what division between 135 or whatever, he would have beat all the guys. We kind of know that, right? At the same time, Crawford needs one more fight, one more big fight, like of this magnitude before you can say he's really on the same conversation with Mayweather or Pacquiao. From his perspective, he's going to say people is kind of moving the goalposts, but to have one fight with the future Hall of Famer, that don't put you above them. We need you to get one more like of these magnitude fights, and then that puts you in the same sort of conversation with them. Until that, like you're the man, you're the best guy in this era. And I do remember when the guy was like, oh, he's the best fighter in the last 12, 15 years. Andre Ward looked over and was like, wait, what? Andre Ward said, wait, what?
Wait, like
Yeah.
what does Scooby do?
So
Although
until he
there
get
might be something, I'm gonna add a little bit to that because I did hear about that conversation. So I'll add
until
to
he until he get one more like high magnitude future Hall of Famer fight, like yeah, he's at best number 3. And even then, with what Usyk has done, should Usyk be there? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Before I get to that part of the conversation, right? I was talking about the thing there in reference to the dates and everything. This is that little thing that I'm sharing there is just the props that Canelo and Crawford had there during that fight. But of course, we had the whole thing there with the Canelo versus Crawford, of course, for undisputed here. So you see, Ring Magazine, they had their little commemorative special edition magazines, which I'm still I'm still shocked that they printed. I'm telling you, they must have printed over 100,000 copies of this thing because there was one of these in every single seat in Allegiant Stadium, every single one. But the fight happened on September 13th, 2025. Okay. It's something because 12 years ago, you seen this was the fight. Mayweather versus Canelo. And yeah, this is the official press kit of that. You see the little like bend in there. So yeah, I've had it for 12 years and counting. But it makes for, as they say, Mexican Independence Weekend, significant for the sport of boxing. But going into this conversation, and I've constantly, referenced boxing academic when it comes to resumes there, or particularly with Terence Crawford, because the one that stands out with Terence Crawford is when he fought Julius Indongo for the undisputed super lightweight championships of the world. And yeah, it's one thing to say, hey, you could only fight who's in front of you. Okay. At other times, it's a situation, right? And that's some of the things there that, some people bring up when it comes to Terence Crawford because he was there under top rank for an extended period of time. Therefore, we weren't able to necessarily see him in bouts, particularly in the welterweight division, that a number of people would have wanted to see and could have improved his overall strength of resume, and that's the thing about it. And I know that, there's a comment in reference to Floyd Mayweather, right? But the thing is, Floyd Mayweather, one of those fights against those guys that people mentioned that could have potentially been his rivals at the time, like a Shane Mosley. When Shane, Oscar, and Floyd were all in the top rank, Floyd wanted those fights. Didn't necessarily get them, When Floyd was going to be fighting Oscar De La Hoya when that fight actually happened, people often forget that he also wanted that fight with Shane Mosley, and Shane Mosley kind of, maneuvered around that. So, yeah, timing could be a lot. But the thing is, still, he fought those guys. He beat those guys. He's able to have those wins over multiple fighters that are going to that are in the Hall of Fame or going to be in the Hall of Fame. That is Floyd Mayweather, right? So with Terence Crawford, when you have, yes, he is a 3-division undisputed champion, right? But like Boxing Academic mentioned, you talk about Alexander Usyk, who was on that list there through ESPN as far as like top 25 fighters in the past 25 years. Alexander Usyk was able to, within a resume, and it still also goes to the situation. Within the cruiserweight division, he was able to defeat the top guys in the cruiserweight division, become the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, was able to defend that cruiserweight championship against Tony Bellew, go up to the heavyweight division, defeat a top 3 fighter twice in Anthony Joshua, then defeat the number 1 guy in Tyson Fury twice, become the undisputed champion in the heavyweight division on 2 separate occasions there when the IBF stripped him, and then he defeated Daniel Dubois again to become undisputed again this year. And so you compare that to a Terence Crawford who had his wins over like a Ricky Burns or, like I said, Julius Ndongo or, a Victor Postal, right? Against a Sean Porter, when Sean Porter had already had his fights with the Danny Garcias, the Keith Thurmans, the Errol Spence Jr.'s, all that type of stuff. And then Errol Spence Jr., when Errol Spence Jr. had his fight with Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Kell Brook, all that other stuff. So, and then, Terence Crawford at 154 fighting Israel Madrimov. That critique will be there. So with this particular situation with Canelo Alvarez, it's kind of similar as far as like timing, as far as like matchups and timing, it's similar to fighting at Errol Spence Jr., where, okay, that fighter beat all of those guys within the division, and then you're facing Terence Crawford. Instead of Terence Crawford being able to fight multiple guys within the division that are within the top 5 or top 10, and then it's like number 1 versus number 2 there, in at least in the sense here with the super middleweight division. But we knew like it was number 1 versus number 2 at welterweight. It was just that, neither one, like for example, neither Terence Crawford or Errol Spence fought Keith Thurman at welterweight. So it's like, but here, that's why, they said, Boxing Academic is mentioned here, that he needs one more fight. Now, on social media, there was the guy that runs the Fight Hype account on X mentioned something there which kind of like seems out of the ordinary. But it had been suggested by Turkey Al-Sheikh some time back. And that is Terence Allen Crawford versus David Benavidez. And I don't know if that could be a possible fight. I just don't see it. I mean, we got what's coming up here for David Benavidez on November 22nd against Anthony Yarde over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and yes, that is at 175 pounds. Yes, David Benavidez has mentioned that he will be involved to a certain extent with Riyadh seasoning for at least a couple more fights after this fight here with Anthony Yarde. But a bout between Benavidez and Terence Crawford, I don't know. I don't see it. But, as someone was mentioning on the live chat earlier, you had Coach Bomack said that Terence Crawford has about 4 to 5 more fights in him. Shout out to Timothy Taylor there with that comment because, like I said, I mean, I wasn't approved for this particular event, so to speak. So I wasn't able to be out there for the post-fight press live. And like I said, with it being that late, listen, I don't know if I would have been able to make it anyway. All right. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey, Mike, you still there? Boxing Academic.
Yes, sir.
There?
Yes, sir. Yep.
All right. Let me give you a question, and I want you to give me your answer, and with virtual no delay. The common denominator is all fighters have moved up from a lower weight class to exert and exude their dominance at a higher weight class. Give me your top 3 fighters, rank them in order, pound per pound. Crawford, Inoue, Usyk.
So there's a lot of things that makes a person pound for pound. So I'm going to say Crawford. in terms of basing that more off of skill and ability. I obviously don't watch a lot of anyway, even though I've started to watch him more, and I do have appreciation, so I put him third, and then Usyk second.
Now, what's
But
funny
if
about
I'm
that?
rating off of straight accolades, then Terence Crawford would probably be second. I don't know. I don't know.
Just so y'all know, folks, unofficially, the Boxing Academic has given a spoiler as to what would be the updated top three in the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. So there you go.
So, and you just when you spoke about Usyk and what all he's done, we know what he's done at cruiserweight. Fought the top people at cruiserweight. We know that. And like I said, jump up to heavyweight, a higher weight class, the common denominator for all three fighters. Beat Joshua twice, beat Fury twice, beat Dubois twice, uh, and whoever else he beat at heavyweight.
Jared Chisora.
Yep, and man, dog, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I love Crawford, and we're giving this dude his flowers as we rightfully should. But I don't know. That's tough to say that resume is better than Usyk's. My my heart says yes because I love Crawford, but when I look at that and I break that down, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Once again, he beat Joshua twice, and Joshua wasn't necessarily faded. He wasn't faded. No, Usyk's just better. And Fury, not faded at all. Not faded at all. A bit overrated in some circles, right? But not faded.
Yeah,
But
right.
Usyk beat him twice, fair and square, and hurt him, and probably could have knocked his ass out on the one fight, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And this, and we know about the first fight with Dubois. We know that, but he emphatically beat him the second time around, right? And just then you follow that up with all his other fights at heavyweight. Wow, that's a hell of a resume to put together. And I said, and once again, we're properly giving Crawford his flowers for what he did last night, and that's a major win for someone that quote unquote hasn't fought anybody, right? You beat the face of boxing, and you jumped up two weight classes, and you're now undisputed at 168. And me necessarily, I don't know if he. Well, like I said, we kind of talked about before the fight happened. What does Crawford do next if in the event that he does win? So, well, now he does. He has won, right? I don't think a David Benavidez fight is just realistic. I just don't. It's not that I think he would duck him. It just doesn't seem why. It's kind of like why. For me,
Yeah.
if he needs one more fight, I would probably meet Boots Ennis, and hope he and beat him emphatically, right? And call it a career like that. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah.
I don't.
But that isn't Terence Allen Crawford, and it was brought up at the post fight presser, and he's like, no, he's like, why? Like, there's no point. Like, why? You know, um, at that current juncture, he kind of like feels like it's kind of maybe it's going backwards, but it's one thing that like one media person that has covered Terence Crawford for some time, brother Ron G of Fight Hype, and he says that like that Crawford kind of views Boots Ennis like him, not just within like the fighting styles or the fighting perspective, but also from a business perspective as far as like coming up through the same manager Cameron Duncan, having opportunities or lack of opportunities over the course of your career while you've been building up your record and seeing about getting the opportunity that you're looking for and struggling to get that opportunity. So I guess he's like saying, you know what, I could give him this chance, but at this point where I'm at right now, I don't see what the benefit of that is there. Boxing Academic, you had something there?
Boots got to get it like everybody else. He got to get it. He got to get it out the mud like everybody else. Unfortunately, he's a victim of his circumstances and of skill, which means that he may not get all the opportunities that he really want. But Boots gotta take some chances or something in order for him to get the opportunities, because why would Bud, who has finally gotten the recognition that he deserves and has essentially reached the pinnacle that he wanted to reach, it doesn't make sense. Like like I hate that I'm
All
still
right, I'll
saying
put
this.
it.
I hate that I'm still saying this,
Go
but
ahead.
Boots got to wait his turn. He got to wait his turn, and or he has to do something to get
Mhm.
himself next in line to be able to get a turn. He got to take some chances. He got to go up and fight the guy whoa, Boots, should you take that fight? Like, he got to fight guys that we're like, whoa, to where it cannot be denied that, he's the guy, and or he should have stayed in the last division and got all them belts and unify and been undisputed in that. But maybe he can't make the weight.
Yeah, Ennis can't make the weight. He can't make the weight. Um, and given the era that both fighters are in, even at this time, it doesn't really make sense. If there was anybody that Terence Crawford would fight that, at least as of right now or now, would kind of like be in a lower division, is actually the fighter that tried but failed in September of 2023 in Jermell Charlo. If there's any fight that's out there for Terence Crawford that I feel like he would want, it's Jermell Charlo, especially after him after first Crawford defeating Errol Spence, and y'all know the back and forth that Crawford and Jermell Charlo had during that fight, and with Charlo, what he was or wasn't able to do against Canelo Alvarez in September of 2023. If there's any fight, at least for me, I'll put this on record. If there's any fight for Terence Crawford to have that is not going to be within 168 or 175 or anything like that, it would be Jermell Charlo. Okay. Now,
But that's just a grudge match.
yeah, well, it would be a hell of a grudge match. I'm gonna tell you that. But I think there was something. Like I said, I wasn't able to watch the Netflix presentation live or the post fight live or anything like that. But there was like a little thing in reference to Terence Crawford as far as like who we could potentially face. And they were talking about the whole thing about Terence Crawford standing as the best or around the best fighters within the past 25 years. And they had a certain person that was on that commentary team that was on the list in Hall of Famer, International Boxing Hall of Famer, Andre Ward. And there was like some type of comment in reference to if it was like out of the picture, if Andre Ward would come out of retirement to face Terence Allen Crawford. So maybe, just maybe, within the realm of possibility, we could see something like that. Hey, if Manny Pacquiao could come out of retirement and fight for the WBC welterweight championship of the world, what would it be to have the former undisputed super middleweight champion and former, what was it, unified light heavyweight champion Andre Ward come out of retirement to face Terence Crawford?
What are we doing here? What's our goal? What are we doing here? Like, what's up with the sport of boxing? Like, what are we doing?
What's funny about that is the fact that
Oh shit!
the tables will be turned. Because prior to last night, one of the big questions out there was like, why should Canelo take this fight, right? But he did. So if that was happening, it'll be, why should Crawford take that fight when Ward has been out of the ring for years? So it's kind of the same kind of. the same scenario and the tables get flipped in the same sense. It sounds interesting, but why should Crawford take that fight? For what? To prove what? Because if he
I
same
don't
thing,
know,
Now,
man.
listen
Well,
to me.
if he
the only
beats
thing
him,
is,
it's expected because he's been on the ring for years.
yeah, the only thing would be because at the end of the day, it's still professional boxing. Keyword professional. And when it comes to money, if you have whatever's presented in front of you and you feel like such and such is the most lucrative opportunity you have, where you might be able to have the best chance of winning, then that's the one you're going to take. You know,
Andre
to
Ward
that
should fight
point,
a Jake Paul. Like, not he shouldn't fight Terence Crawford.
like active, yeah, Terence Crawford, yeah. To that point, given with Canelo Alvarez facing Terence Crawford, reportedly he got 150 million for this particular fight against Terence Crawford, which kind of seems interesting because wasn't there some time back when it said that you could have potentially fought for 150 million dollars to face David Benavidez, but you didn't necessarily do that. So for some people, they felt like Canelo Alvarez thought he could get a quick buck out of facing the Terence Crawford, who maybe kind of like was a little bit confident that he could beat Terence Crawford, but ended up getting outboxed, outpointed, and out hustled. Therefore, a decision loss. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. It says Timothy Taylor says in reference to Terence Crawford, he has to fight who Turkey wants him to fight. So yeah, he might get the no. You fight this guy. You fight this guy. Like he told Subriel Matias that he had to fight the WBC Mando there after he won that fight against Alberto Puello over in Queens, man. That I thought that was funny, but yeah, with Terence Crawford, I mean, there's like a multitude of possibilities as who he could potentially fight next. As far as like 168, I don't think he'll fight like any of these guys at 168 that's out there. Like he ain't gonna be fighting his stablemate Lester Martinez. That ain't gonna happen. He ain't gonna fight a Christian and Billy. That ain't gonna happen. He ain't gonna fight a freaking Osleis Iglesias. Like in the overall scope of things, there why would he fight Osleis Iglesias? Why would he fight a Diego Pacheco? Like anybody that people would name out there at 168 that's a contender at 168, he ain't gonna fight those guys. It's kind of similar to the thing there with Boots Ennis. What's the point of fighting those particular fighters when one, you just had your chance to be in the spotlight in 2023 and having these high profile fights? So what else is out there for you? Now, for me, if it isn't David Benavidez, this might be out of the realm of possibility. But if it's going to be somebody there at 175 pounds, then why can't it be the undisputed champion at 175, Dimitri Bivol? Or is he still undisputed? I don't know if they stripped him or not, but oh yeah, they did strip him. My bad. What am I doing here? They did strip him because David Benavidez got the WBC belt. So yeah, they stripped him. But we know that Dimitri Bivol is the number one guy at 175. So hey, what about that fight? Crawford versus Bivol at 175, unified light heavyweight championship. Who knows? So man, but that's a lot to kind of like decipher. I didn't even get into like what could be next for Canelo. Could it be a rematch? I don't know. What was it? Someone had mentioned here in the chat some time back. They said like you still had hey, shout out to DJ Rush. He said some Canelo fans doubling down saying that Canelo won, ignoring their eyes last night. It's crazy. They're talking about, but Canelo outlanded Crawford in the majority of the rounds and that type of stuff. But come on, y'all. Y'all know it ain't about the amount of punches, it's about the effect that those punches had on the opponent. So, That just tells you everything you need to know right there. But for Canelo, I mean, one, it is a voluntary defense of those titles, so he does they likely have a rematch clause, so he could potentially have a rematch with Terence Crawford. Outside of that, he didn't really have that interest to face, David Benavidez. Um, Maybe a fight with Dimitri Bivol could be in the card still for Canelo, but having this type of loss and to have it the way that it was makes you think like, hey, he got paid a significant amount of money. He's like had a whole bunch of things that he's done with the money he's already been paid over the past 10 years. It ain't out of the question that this fight that happened on September 13th, 2025 could be the last one for Canelo Alvarez. You know what I mean?
Well, is he in
So
the contract with Turkey? Is he not?
yeah, he should be still in the contract with Turkey though. That's the thing about it. Shout out to the Topic TV, on the live chat. It says Bud versus Canelo is going to be a trilogy. Hmm.
And think about this
Timothy
too
Taylor.
with Canelo.
Mhm.
Honestly, he can do what the hell he want to do because he's gonna get paid regardless, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and for me, I think a lot of people agree too. Canelo does need to have a belt in order to have a profitable fight. He doesn't. He's definitely in that category and been there for
Yep.
quite some time. The championship belts, that's just a winner's wrestling for him. So he can definitely do what he wants to do, but probably all roads probably does lead back to a rematch because that's what makes sense for both fighters. Because even with
Mhm.
Canelo, is he gonna fight like a Bamili? No, who doesn't show any nuance to his game at all. He's just a straightforward
None.
fighter, but no nuance. Pacheco, a younger fighter who's probably on the cusp. Uh, what's the reward in that for Canelo fighting him? Little to none. So it's like it looks like a rematch. It does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That
money
would be in the realm of possibility. Go ahead, academic.
money is definitely the motivator for him to have a rematch with Canelo, but as far as legacy, fighting Canelo don't really do anything for him anymore. Like he gets the credit for this time, but fighting Canelo now does nothing. Like it don't add to him being the like in the comparison of the best fighter in the last whatever. It don't notch
Right.
him up above or in the same conversation with Floyd and Pacquiao. It would just be a financial decision, which shit, it might be a good decision, but it doesn't do nothing for his legacy.
Hmm. Now, like you were mentioning earlier, you said that Crawford needs another one of those, career defining fights here. And one of the previous criticisms for, Crawford was that even in the sense of him, fighting Errol Spence, going into that, he was a favorite. Okay. In this particular bout against Canelo Alvarez, he was an underdog, but he was not like a considerable underdog to start off. It wasn't like no, like 5-1 favorite or 4-1 favorite for Canelo. It was pretty much like around 3-1. And then the closing odds were like around what, like minus 180 or something like that.
Hmm.
So it was like people that were putting in the money, they kind of knew. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was like, yeah, Crawford was at plus 140 or plus 150, some as low as like plus 135, while Canelo was like for a favorite almost like minus 180 to as low as like minus 155. That's real close. You can't, like, you really can't get that much money off of that, if you were putting money down, So it's like when you have odds that are that close going into the bout, then it's almost like, was he really? that much of a considerable favorite against the Terence Crawford if some people just knew that maybe Terence Crawford would be a guy that could beat Canelo Alvarez. So that goes into the whole thing about how significant the win was overall for Terence Crawford. Because if it's somebody that wasn't really a huge underdog of sorts, wasn't a huge underdog at all, then how big was the win? That's that. That's going to be up for debate. But how big is the win when you have people, a number of people that felt like Crawford could win that fight? That tells you something.
So I'm not saying he should do this, and I don't want to seem like I'm moving the goalposts, but the gentleman's comment where he said the only way he'll fight Bivol. Can you pull that one?
Yeah, Crawford will
So
fight
Tim,
Bivol if Bivol beat Benavidez and becomes undisputed.
so if if Crawford either A fights Benavidez, which again I'm not saying this is realistic, I'm not saying he gonna do it. I don't even know if it's a good idea. I don't even know if I would be like his team and I would agree to doing something like that. It just it it might not be realistic, but I'm just saying for the one more
Mm-hmm.
legacy defining fight, if he either A fought Benavidez to get the undisputed title at 175, and or if Dimitri Bivol beat Benavidez to win undisputed and he fought Dimitri Bivol, that would be enough to me. That would be enough. Like he needs another career defining fight. And
Okay.
and it seemed like for him collecting rings and belts and stuff is his thing. So undisputed at 175, why
Hmm.
not?
Well, my thing is too, given what, and I think this might also be a little bit of a factor of sorts, maybe in Crawford's part, right? Because a number of people felt like this would have been a factor in the Canelo fight, but I said no because of the matchup. But with Crawford, what is it? He had this is his fight in 2025. The Madrimon fight was 2024. The Spence fight was 2023. The Avanesian fight was 2022. The Sean Porter fight was 2021. Like, you go back, he's only had these one fights a year, like just one fight a year. So is that something to the point of where he is kind of like conserving his body of sorts? Because since 2019, he's only had, one fight a year. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So it looks like it's going to be the same here. Like, he's not going to step in the ring before the end of this year. That's not going to happen. Okay. So if he has his next fight, or probably around this time in 2026, is that going to be something to the point where, you know what, he's going to say, let's see what happens here over the next couple of months. And then once they make a decision on who they're going to fight, they're going to actively pursue that fight and just be focusing on that particular fighter. Because I think that is really key for this particular bout that happened between Crawford and Canelo. Is that I think Crawford was focusing on the Canelo fight since, I would presume, October or November of last year. I think they were pursuing that fight since that particular point last year. So they had all of that time to kind of study and see what Canelo does and what he's doing. Kind of like take into account Canelo's bout against William Scola this May, and see all of his mannerisms and do what needed to be done in order to properly counter everything that Canelo would do in the ring. I think they're gonna try to do that for Crawford's next bout. They're gonna see who they would want as an opponent, and they're gonna focus on that opponent well before the actual fight takes place. You know, so I mean that's mainly here what I really wanted to talk about. I mean, like a lot, to decipher here within what did I say, almost 2 hours. I'm not gonna go into the undercard here in this particular podcast. I'm sorry. The only bout that I was remotely interested in was in Billy versus Martinez, and that was a great fight, a very, very great fight that ended in a crazy result as a draw. Should have been Martinez for the win. There for that. But I'll kind of like post something up as far as like a little bit of a Bison Source podcast bonus for that there. Unless y'all wanted to kind of like chime on that real quick.
Well, I want to say something on your comment where you say he only fight once a year, and it's very likely he'll keep the same strategy of finding a guy that he wants to fight and then focusing energy on making sure that he's ready for that guy in the future. Shit, maybe you are saying this, but that aligned with him fighting once a year. So in 2 years, he fight once next year, and then whoever get the belts between Benavidez or Bivol, which again, this may not be realistic, but whoever gets the belts between them in 2 years, we got an undisputed fight.
In 2 years. But think about that. In 2 years, like Terence Crawford would be 39 years old. And what we got currently here for the light heavyweight division, you got, former undisputed champion there in Artur Beterbiev at 41 years old. So, hey, as they say, anything's possible. You know what I mean? But, it's just something to think about within the realm of possibility for Terence Crawford to potentially challenge either a Dimitri Bivol or a David Benavidez there in the light heavyweight division. Now, as I mentioned some time back, it said the person that runs Fight Hype account said Crawford versus Benavidez, but we'll see what happens here over these next couple of months because Benavidez versus Anthony Yard is over 2 months away, and after that we'll see what is next on the docket within the scope of the light heavyweight division.
But could you imagine how that would look, Crawford versus either Bivol or Benavidez, as far as the size disparity? How would that look?
With Bivol, not really that much because Bivol to me is a guy that is there at 175, doesn't really go higher than that. He's basically been at 175 his whole career and that type of stuff, right? Well, like for example with Bivol, right? When he had his win over Canelo Alvarez, his next win was against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. Zurdo Ramirez right now is what, the unified champion at cruiserweight? So that tells you that Bivol ain't, he's not even going above 175 to compete. But we all know about David Benavidez and where he comes from in order to first initially make 168 and now 175 pounds. To have a Terence Crawford fight a David Benavidez, that would be like, oh snap, if he gets this win over David Benavidez, that would like have people going like, what in the world is Terence Crawford? That would kind of like be to to what Boxing Academic was saying as far as like having one of those other challenges in Terence Crawford's overall career. You know what I mean? Yeah, shout out to Timothy Taylor, man. Yeah, I mean that was, but remember that happened last year when Canelo fought Jaime Munguia. In a way fought what was it? He fought like that next day too. So it was like, yeah, Canelo fight, it kind of like dominated the news cycle. So when Inoue fought Luis Neri the day after, Canelo fought Jaime Munguia, that's what it was. And that's what we're seeing here with Naoya Inoue facing MJ Akhmadaliev. Like that whole fight week, nothing but Canelo versus Crawford. Like I'm telling you, a number of people forgot that Naoya Inoue was facing MJ Akhmadaliev, earlier today. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So yeah, there's that. Oh, you have something else there, Brother Terrell?
No, I forgot about that too. Real quick before you jump on that, I want to say big up to Ricky Hatton. Unfortunate news today. Found dead in his home.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he actually was dealing with other issues like I guess mental health issues like that. I didn't realize that was part of the struggle. Gone too soon. Gone too soon. Gave some great fights. Made a great presence on the sport of boxing. Uh, Great fights against Mayweather and Pacquiao, even though those were both losses. But he did it his own way, did it his style, brought his British fans with him, and brought that presence here to America when he fought over here across the pond. But yeah, just that's sad with that and hearing that too. So
Mm-hmm. In the I would say the modern era of boxing, particularly within those weight classes there, 135, 140, 147. The thing with Ricky Hatton was he was, a fighter there that, kind of like established himself, particularly on 140, built himself a following there, over in, England, Manchester, particular or whatever it was, right? And then he was able to like have a following that was like none other. But then everyone knows like his kind of like his defining moment was his bout against Kosuzu, there for the IBF Super Lightweight Championship, and for him to not only outpoint him but to stop Kosuzu there at 140 within that era of Floyd Mayweather, Miguel Cotto, and that type of thing there at 140 pounds, kind of like had him stand out. And so, that's when they had to talk about potentially having him facing Floyd Mayweather Jr. And it eventually happened there in December of 2007 at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. And I talked about it earlier when it comes to boxing atmospheres and having stadium fights in comparison to like, arenas like a basketball arena or something like that. Like the scene there between Floyd Mayweather and Ricky Hatton that fight week, having all those UK fans there, having them in the building, screaming for it. Ricky Hatton is probably one of the crazy scenes there for boxing within that time period. And yeah, he had those, those losses to Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, and he after that, he had been out the game for some time, and then tried to come back a few years later, but ended up losing there. So, but yeah, he was dealing with a whole lot after that, and eventually succumbed to those struggles there. But he had been one of the more notable fighters within that particular era, like within like 2004 through 2007, 2008, or whatever it is there. So for Ricky Hatton, there, leaving us here like earlier today, man, that was a serious blow to the boxing community there. But as they say, man, you don't play boxing, and Ricky Hatton, he gave it his all, there in every single fight that he pretty much had. So, got to give props to Ricky Hatton and what he was able to do in his professional career. So, condolences to the family of Ricky Hatton, and man, yeah, I don't have like a I don't have a thing there for like a sound check, but we would probably would have done like a 10 bell salute there for Ricky Hatton there. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's that. But that is basically what I have here. This has pretty much been like a 2 hour podcast just talking about Canelo versus Crawford there. So what I'll do is I'll probably have like a couple of videos to kind of talk about, whether it's other fights on the card, and a little bit about, Naira Inoue's performance against MJ Akhmadaliev. So I'm gonna, post that up. Of course, the discussion reference to Terence Crawford and his standing in boxing history, recent history, or all time. It's just gonna be here for at least the next week or so. Y'all be on the lookout for like the schedule for this upcoming week for the Boxing Source channel, because I have to see if the show with Coach Ronnie Shields will happen on its regularly scheduled time, because I don't necessarily come back, basically to my home area until like after or right around that time that you usually have the scheduled show. So we'll see how that's going to work itself out, and we'll probably have an update by tomorrow on how that's going to be handled. With that being said, but once again, big thanks for everyone that's been able to join in, watching live on the multiple platforms here. It'll see if I'll be able to have it in podcast form here pretty soon. Given that I'm like I said, out of home base, so to speak. So we'll see about having this on audio form there through like Spotify, whatever it is. But big thanks to Boss Academic. Big thanks to the birthday guy here, Brother Terrell, for joining us here on the panel. And big thanks for everyone that's been able to listen live and on the replay. Be sure to share. Hit the like button if you're on YouTube or Rumble or whatever it is. And be sure to follow the Boston Source, man. We're gonna have a lot more content here for you because, like I said, we might even have like a even busier week next week, even with all the stuff that happened here this past week. We might have even more here for this next week coming up. So y'all be on the lookout for all of that. And once again, hey, I'll just say it here in this last point, right? The point of boxing is to hit and not get hit, not to stand and trade. On that note, folks, I'm out. Have a good evening, everybody.
Later.